we will kick off because we've got a fair bit to get through. Just to say, for those of you who haven't been on these calls before, for the last couple, we have recorded the session, partially so we can get a decent, accurate minute, but also that we put a version up on the partnership website so that people can see what's going on. If anybody doesn't consent to that, can you kind of make yourself known, because we will need to make alternative arrangements if that's the case. But if nobody puts their hand up as objecting, we will continue, and you'll see probably along the top of your screen information that it's being recorded. Okay, first off, well, welcome. First off, but we will go straight to apologies, of which I'm certainly aware of a few. 3 of our councillors are on calls or meetings, council business this morning. Raymond Bremner, Carl Rosie and Jan McEwen. They have made a very good suggestion that for next year, for 2023, we look at the council's own calendar of meetings and try and fit in with that calendar. And Ron, you'll be aware of the difficulty of everybody trying to make sure they can attend everything. So we're trying to do that. And Gail, I think if I'm right, we're going to go with now is it the third Monday?
The first Friday.
See, that was my first test, Gail. Well done, you've passed.
So there's quarterly meetings, so each quarter it'll be the...
Not, you're frozen. Okay, so Gail's frozen, but that's what we will plan to do for 2023 as we go forward. So when we come out with the meeting requests, you'll see that it's timed so that we can fit in with councillors' business, so that we can get it. We've been well off for councillor attendance in the past, but this is just to try and sustain it as we go forward. So hopefully that'll work. The other couple of apologies I have are Ian Gregory from Caithness Roads Recovery, and also Kirstine from Let's Get On With It Together. And I think there is a written paper from Kirstine which we'll come to later on. Is anybody else aware of apologies? Sadie, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I've got apologies from Michael Simpson.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks, Sadie. Anybody else?
Sadie, Michael was trying to join the meeting. Oh, I think he is in the meeting.
Oh, okay. He wasn't sure if he would be able to attend. So when I didn't see him, I thought I'd pop his apologies in. So, hi, Michael.
He's there.
He is there.
Looking very festive, if you don't mind me saying so, Michael. Right. Okay. That's apologies. Notes from the last meeting. There were actions arising from the last minute, of which there were 4, and 3 of them are complete. There's one item that's not perhaps outstanding, but certainly I'm not sure what the status is. And that was Katie Matthews taking an action to talk to Joan and Keith about the North Highland Community Sports Hub. I don't know, did that conversation happen? Keith, did that conversation happen?
So I'm just trying to recall now. I believe that I think there was a meeting. I think it possibly clashed with my diary, so I think that she has had. Yeah. I'll see if there's any further update on that. But that's I do recall that there was a meeting. Just wasn't able to attend it myself.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay. I think that's us got the actions complete as well. Right, so we've got 2 presentations today from differing partners. One of them is, and I will in a second ask Elena if she's on. Yes, you are. I can see you on the call. So I'll ask Elena in a couple of minutes to do her presentation. Elena represents Nesta, which I'll ask her to explain as she kicks that presentation off. The other presentation was due to be from Brian Dodds at Caithness Voluntary Group. Brian's not able to be here, but we're hoping that we will still have a presentation. It's the Caithness Poverty Action Group, so Alan Tate is hoping to do that in Brian's place, but Alan is also struggling with clashing commitments this morning, so he's going to join us slightly later. So we will probably have to juggle the agenda slightly to reflect that. Okay, so Elena, if you wouldn't mind kicking us off and maybe introduce yourself.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us. I'm aware we've met already a couple of you, but lots of new faces that I haven't had a chance to meet yet. So thank you for your time. I'm Elena, and I'm part of the People-Powered Results team at Nesta. And we've been working alongside my colleague David at Hub North, who's giving you a quick wave. He'll have a chance to introduce himself shortly as well, and my colleague Rose as well, who's joining here. So we have been working alongside Hub North and partners across Caithness on a piece of work called the Place-Based Demonstrator, and we'll share a little bit about it. But in a kind of before we dive into kind of sharing a little bit more with you about what the work is about and how we're keen for you to be involved, in a nutshell, the Nesta, the organisation we work for, is an innovation that's focused on social innovation for the public good. And for us as a team in People-Powered Results, kind of at the core of our work is the belief that when people who are closest to particular issues or challenges, so that's citizens, residents, people with lived experience, frontline practitioners, all of our work is focused on supporting people who are closest to particular issues or challenges to play a role and participate in shaping local solutions, with the belief that when that happens, it leads to more robust solutions and impact that sticks. And that's the principle that we're operating on with the place-based demonstrator work as well. So with that in mind, David, Rose and I will share a little bit with you about what's happening with this work and how we're keen for you to be involved. And that will last about 10 minutes or so. And then we've got some time for questions and discussions and reflection. Anything immediate at the top of people's minds before we jump in?
Just an apology for me to David and Rose for forgetting to introduce them as well.
That's all right. They've got plenty of time now. All right, David, I'll share my screen and then hand over to you for a quick introduction.
Thanks, Eleanor, and hello everybody. Thanks again for inviting us to speak today. It's really helpful and timely, as you'll find out in a few minutes. Now, we did a version of this yesterday, and I think a couple of people on this call were at that one. I don't know if Ron in particular was at that one, so apologies in advance for the repetition. If Eleanor moves on to the next slide, I'll just set the scene a little bit with some context. So some of this team, including Ian himself, actually have been working with partners across Caithness to review a number of projects in the area and encouraging everybody to take stock of their activity and to think about priority outcomes and think about how we align all of that towards those priority outcomes. And we know that there were some gaps in that work, not least in engaging in a bit more depth with the voluntary sector, although we were influenced by, for example, the Aspiring Communities work as part of that, but also the private sector. And over the course of the next phase, we hope to remedy some of that. So the work that we did over the course of early 2022 finished with several key messages, namely that despite resilient and vibrant communities, Caithness is still quite fragile, with an ageing population, loads of health and wellbeing challenges. Ian was keen to point out skills and employability and economic development needs in the area, And of course, the geography means that there's transport and physical and digital infrastructure deficits across the area. And I don't even think we have to start talking about the cost of living disadvantages that people in Caithness face. So we finished that bit of work in the summer, and I'm moving on now to thinking about phase 2. And that phase 2 bit of work, in that we're trying to help partners and communities in Caithness to meet those challenges and help deliver against those outcomes in a pragmatic way. So what we're doing is we're using some additional funding that we were successful in bidding for from the Scottish Government, and using that in a relatively short period of time to identify a number of spaces that can be quickly repurposed to meet needs of communities in certain areas. So on the map you'll see there we've got Thurso and Wick and potentially Leibster and Castletown. And the purpose really of identifying those spaces is to look at how they can be quickly repurposed. And some of that might just be through better co-location or integration of services, or helping with access to services, or improving the equity of service provision in those areas. My colleagues Elena and Rose, who you'll meet in a few minutes, they'll talk to you about how we're engaging and facilitating conversations and discussions about those specific spaces. But I'll just sort of set the scene a little bit in terms of what the project we're doing is about, because I think it's got, I would say, sort of 3 main aims. So first of all, it's been used as a test of change. So what we want to do is to identify and test different approaches to delivering services in those localities. It's absolutely not about new builds, but about collaborative design and use of existing assets and services in those areas, and trying to align that with a living well locally agenda, which I think we're all reasonably familiar with. Secondly, we want it to provoke wider transformation in Caithness. So some of that might just be about replicating the work we're doing more widely. So doing it in other localities across Caithness, through for example, establishing a network of mutually supporting and connected spaces across the area. But it might even just be that these spaces lead to new and better ways of working across communities through integration and co-location and all that kind of stuff. And finally, we want to use this as a kind of learning environment as well. So certainly so that local partners, including everybody on this call, but also communities themselves and Scottish Government and other regional and national partners are benefiting from the work. And some of that is reasonably practical, I think, because at the bottom of that slide you'll see that it notes that the Scottish Government is a partner here, and it's also funding the work. So we've been successful in getting several £100,000 worth of funding with a few caveats, and the Scottish Government is expecting progress and commitment to further work post-April 2023. So just some quick points before I finish off on the spaces that we've identified, because I imagine that might elicit some questions later on. First of all, the spaces that are on that map were proposed by a leadership group made up of senior folk at the council and the NHS, Ian's colleagues at HIE, UHI and a couple of others. And their view was that these locations that have been spotted on that map there are the most appropriate facilities to at least explore in some depth, and that they're in line with other work going on locally. And I think that's important. So some of those have been cited because of work that's already going on in health and social care redesign, or UHI's plans to reshape its activities across the area. So we're kind of working with the grain of that work. We're a little bit constrained by the funding and timing of this work, so we need to act reasonably fast to ensure that we've got some things up and running as those tests are changed by April of next year. So these spaces have been identified because they're vacant or underused, they're reasonably well located within settlements, and that most of them are kind of easily repurposed. So again, that's helping the speed element. But it's important, I think, to say that they are, as I said already, tests of change. So any work we do in these spaces absolutely doesn't preclude doing work elsewhere. In fact, the purpose of this is to prove the case for changes like these and lay foundations for more place-based investment across Caithness. And I suppose I should finish off by saying that, you know, nothing's set in stone. So although we've identified some locations and are starting to explore them in a bit of depth, the deep dive sessions that Eleanor and Rose will talk about now, they may suggest that these spaces don't help us meet outcomes. And ultimately, this is about outcomes. It's about improving the lives of people that live in Caithness. If that is the case, we'll just have to find alternatives in fairly short order. So I think that's probably enough in terms of context. For me, that's what the project's about. I've highlighted some constraints in terms of funding and timescales, and a need to demonstrate some stuff by April of next year. But what Eleanor and Rose will now do is just talk you through some immediate work that's going to take place in December and January. Over to you, Eleanor.
Thank you, David. So I'll share a little bit now about what's going to happen in practice, kind of if we're working backwards from SG timescales and needing to have some tests of change that are kind of committed from April 2023. Working backwards from there, what we have been planning is effectively a two-stage engagement exercise that to really kind of give us the opportunity to help both communities of interest, as in service providers and the voluntary sector, as well as communities of place, as in people who live, work and study around these areas, to both have their say around how might we test out using these spaces in a different way that really achieves the outcomes that matter for us here. So with that in mind, what we're planning is a series of virtual sessions or kind of deep dive sessions this side of Christmas. And these are going to be primarily kind of, because we know that we don't have a standing start in terms of community engagement. We know that people that live and work in Caithness have already had their say around what are the things that matter to them, what are the changes that they want to see. We know that happened in 2018 through the Aspiring Communities work. We know that the council issued another survey earlier on in 2022. So we have been bringing insights from both of these pieces together into a bit of a snapshot of what our communities telling us matters to them. So these initial sessions in December are going to be primarily for communities of interest, as in service providers, to have a look at kind of what are we hearing from communities already? What does that mean then in terms of what are the outcomes that we really want to prioritise and achieve together for communities by reimagining how we use these existing spaces. And what will happen between then these sessions in December and February is that we'll pull together all of those views and insights and work alongside architects to develop some initial design briefs or kind of examples of tests of change, and then hold some in-person sessions in February. And that will be then bringing together both communities of places, so people that live, work and study around here, as well as service providers and the voluntary sector all together, to really start looking and kind of dig deeper into those initial designs or tests of change, and really kind of refine and agree on what it is that we want to test out effectively from April onwards. And we're mindful that people will have varying degrees of interest, and so what we're planning for in February is probably a mixture, kind of on-site, in person, of both informal drop-in, coffee morning sort of thing for people that just want to pop in for 5 minutes and quickly have their say, as well as a more extended workshop or session then for people to actually kind of really deeply engage with the content as well. Rose, is there anything missing from your point of view in terms of what's happening in practice, or shall we chat through next steps?
I'm happy to go into next steps.
Great.
Thanks, Eleanor and David. Hi everyone, I'm Rose, and I'm just going to share a little bit about what's happening next and coming up over the next couple of weeks. So part of what I'm doing is I'm going to be sharing an invite and a request. So we know that all these plans, these can't really happen without you, and that's going to be a really important part of what we're doing. And so we'd like to invite you to come along to these 3 online sessions. And also to help us by inviting relevant colleagues who'd be interested in joining these sessions. So Eleanor's given a bit of an introduction to what these will look like, but they have sort of 3 main purposes around building on this work to date, so sharing a little bit about what we know so far, and exploring specifically how that collaboration can impact our communities. The second one is around developing a shared vision for these spaces, and thinking about what outcomes can be achieved through building on this current potential of the spaces. And then thirdly, understanding that impact co-location could have on service delivery, and how we can continue to work together to create that. So as Eleanor said, this is building on work to date. So these spaces have been identified. We already know that there is focus for what these could look like. So for example, the UHI campus, we know that's going to be a really important skills and development space. So the conversations will be around that, but we're also thinking about other ways that that's important to our communities. In Carnegie Library, we know about the particular proximity in the town to the hospital, and that it's already been identified as a space that could be useful in terms of health, well-being and care. And then with drill hall and daycare, we know that these are important community areas. And so thinking across all of these different focuses, what could we do with that space? And so, as I said, we've got these coming up in the next couple of weeks. I think, as Gail said, the December dates was attached to the email to this meeting. That includes how to sign up and also sharing it along to colleagues. I think the final thing for me to say is that please do continue talking to us about this. And my email's there on the screen. It's rose.minchell@nesta.org.uk. So if you have any questions, or maybe if you can't join us for these sessions, then do let us know, because it would be good to have a conversation with you as well and have your voice in this. I think that's everything from me. But Eleanor, do you want to pass back to you?
Yeah, that's brilliant. Only other thing to add was, Joan, I can see that you're on the call as well, and apologies, this might have been a bit of a repetition for you, but we're also kind of mindful that there's going to be a consultation happening in Thurso in parallel as well. So we started conversations with Joan about how we might join the dots and join forces with those two pieces of work happening together. That's broadly it from us. So I'm going to press pause now and open it up. Really keen to hear questions, reflections. Alexander.
Right, can you hear me just now?
Yep.
Yes, you won't hear me. I wasn't on audio when I came in. I'm going to be a bit greedy and ask two questions. Just trying to think, because I saw that you had the drill hall advertised. I just putting an idea out there. If you've heard that the Thurso West Church is closing by 2028, and it's directly next door, have you considered going there? Because it's a community asset. I don't know if you know its history. It was done up about 15 years ago for a bequest from a parishioner of up to £1 million. And it already is used as a community asset. It has a Steinway piano, for instance, which is maintained by the Life Arts Centre, and it has a fine music stand as well. And it is probably the I'd say one of the two best maintained old churches in Thurso. It's a similar age to the drill hall. But it won't require any or very little additional work to it. So
that's a really good call.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alexander. Just for clarity, though, and the West Church absolutely get that. The drill hall that we're talking about here is the Castletown drill hall, not the Thurso drill hall.
Oh, my mistake.
So, your point
bit,
about the West Church is well made.
So in that case, that's somewhere in that's a location in Thurso which isn't even been considered. Yes, that was my mistake, because I was fixated on the drill hall in Castletown. And the second question or point about place based, it's a pity Councillor Rosie isn't here, because he's been very passionate about a renewal of the high school in Thurso. That's had it's not a sudden collapse. It's been known about for some time, but there's been has to be a sudden closure of one building, and there's pessimism about another building. So with regards to the place-based funding and the renewal of the UHI, are there any steps being made to have a new high school? And because that could be combined with the UHI, it could even be combined with the NHS redesign. And at one of the redesign meetings I was at, I did ask that question, I think about a year ago, and I was told that estates were aware of it. And
I know not to jump in there too much, but yeah. I know Carl has been talking to UHI and council corporately has been talking to UHI, so that's definitely on the radar.
Yes, I think the Thurso High School had a projected lifespan of 60 years, and it's 60 years now. So,
indeed,
and it could be for a complete a lot of the other primary schools in Thurso could be incorporated into that.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Alexander. David, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to respond directly to Alexander's comment about Carl Rosey. Carl was in the meeting that we spoke at yesterday and raised similar points. So we want to bring him back into the conversation about what's happening in Thurso with UHI and so on. So we are aware of that and his concerns, and I think everybody else's concerns actually about the high school. So noted, and we are progressing with that one.
And I think it also illustrates the wider point that the landscape doesn't stand still for any space of time or at all.
No, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Good. Okay. Anybody else got questions they want to ask at the moment? No? Okay. Well, in that case, Eleanor and David and Rose, thank you very much. And we will disseminate those dates, and hopefully you will continue to get engagement and going into January, February next year as we move forward.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Really keen that people are involved in that, so that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thanks very much for joining. You're welcome to stay, but otherwise we will release you back into the wild, and you can get on with your day. But yeah, you're welcome to stay.
Thank you.
Thank
very
you.
Much.
I'll
Okay.
stick around and
Great.
listen
Yes,
in.
absolutely. You're welcome. Good. Okay. Thanks, folks. And we do not, I don't think, have Alan back on the call yet. So what I propose to do is jump one in the agenda, and we will talk a little bit about the Highland CPP, which I speak about at most of these meetings. We are again, and we need to sort this, but again, the Highland CPP actually meets on Friday this week, so it's the wrong way round for us. And although we will be able to feed elements of this meeting into the call, I suppose the main thing that's happened since September, I think, which is the last Highland CPP, is that we are planning a workshop for partners on the morning of this Friday before the full board meets, and it will be focused on the cost of living crisis and what partners are able to do within their own sometimes limited regional abilities to mitigate that. So there will be I think most of the partners actually together on Friday morning talking about that. That will then get fed into the Highland board meeting in the middle of the day on Friday, and we will come out of it with hopefully some actions that are agreed at Highland board level. And that was a commitment from the partners back in September, which was due to happen in October and unfortunately had to be postponed. So this is it just happening now. And as we all know, the cost of living crisis continues to change around us. And what we know this week is possibly not the same as what we knew 2 weeks ago. So it's going to be difficult to keep pace with this, but we're going to have to try. You'll hear some of this on a local level when Alan talks from a poverty action group perspective, and you'll probably also hear some of this. I know, Julie, some of this might come up in what you speak about in terms of Caithness Cares later on as well. It's likely that we will feed in some work that's going on a Caithness and Sutherland level, which is about fuel poverty, and Gail might want to speak about that in a minute, but there's a piece of work that we've been involved in commissioning as HIE, which will hopefully report sort of tail end of this year, beginning of next year. And although it's not specifically Caithness and Sutherland based, there'll be elements of it which will be really useful for us. It repeats some of the messages that we've already heard in terms of the additional costs of fuel in the north. Things like us not having gas grid connections north of Inverness, although we've got stranded gas networks in Wick and Thurso. All of those factors, I think we're trying to put a case together which gives as clear a picture as possible to people from out with the Highlands. Gail, is there anything you want to say about that piece of work just now that we can share?
There's nothing shareable at the moment. We have regular kind of catch-up meetings with Changeworks who are leading the project. So we just had some interim kind of details shared just this week, actually. So I will keep everybody in the loop about it. So Ian's right. At an area level, we're supporting the project. So Caithness and Sutherland is going to be a kind of case study example for the wider piece. So it then goes wider into Highlands and Islands, and it then goes wider into remote rural Scotland. So there's three kind of big elements to the piece of work. One thing I will probably be doing, and I know Sadie is on the call. Sadie, I think Changeworks have been in touch with you already. They are looking for some individuals to interview about fuel poverty. So I've got an email to kind of circulate. That'll all be done anonymously. And there won't be any kind of recording on camera or anything like that. So Sadie, am I right in thinking they've been in touch with you directly?
Yes, they have. Yes, I've put an interest back to say we're happy to participate, so I'm just waiting to hear back from them.
Great, thank you. So yeah, the report is due to be finished for the end of February. If I get anything that's kind of I can circulate before, between now and then, I certainly will do that to the group.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks, Gail. And related point that I was going to make, we were involved last week in a joint call between myself as chair of the Caithness Community Planning Partnership, and Stephen, your colleague Scott, as chair of the Sutherland Community Partnership, and the leads from both partnerships, basically, in an effort to join up what we are saying, not just on fuel poverty, but on a range of issues, so that we are coming forward with a North Highland perspective. The way that the Sutherland Community Partnership is structured is slightly different from the way we work here, but I think we all agreed that we are effectively working on the same issues, so there is absolutely no point in duplicating or indeed leaving gaps when we are all at the coalface on this issue. So that was a useful starting point, and it was probably no more than that. And we'll feed what we learnt on that to the Highland Board on Friday. Hopefully both Scott and myself will be present there. And the other thing I was going to mention, just in terms of the Highland Community Planning Partnership, and you may well have picked this up through your own organisations already, is that the Scottish Parliament, through its local government committee, is running an inquiry into community planning in Scotland at the moment. It's actually live until the end of this month, to the end of December. We'll circulate. There's actually about 4 questions that they're asking people to be answered. We'll circulate them afterwards, and again, we'll be talking about it at the Highland Community Planning Partnership on Friday, with a view to the Highland Community Planning Partnership putting a response into it. It may well be that Caithness Community Planning Partnership wants to put a response into it, or indeed you as individual partners might want to put a response in on what works and what doesn't work. They're a very relatively straightforward set of questions to answer. So what we'll do is we'll share those questions, and if I get a chance before the end of the week, I'll share some of the initial thoughts that we've been formulating on what works and what doesn't work. HIE is probably going to put a response in itself. We work with a number of community planning partnerships across the Highlands and Islands, so it's going to be difficult to come up with an overall response to how community planning works across the board, but we're going to put a response in anyway. What works in Highland might not work in Shetland, for example. But that's the plan, and again, we shall share what we as an agency put in with you once we've done that. I don't know if anybody has already seen that consultation, but if not, then we'll get it out to you so that you can choose whether you want to respond or not. And that's it pretty much for Highland CPP. I wonder, could we, unless there are any questions in there, sorry, should have asked that. Not seeing hands up. Michael, yes.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. Whatever happens, decided or agreed upon on Friday won't come back to this group until March the 3rd. Is that right? Partnership meeting on Friday.
Formally, but we can't afford to wait 2.5 months for these things to be taken forward. So it'll either be the individual subgroups that are focusing on specific issues, or if we need to, we can create a specific meeting. It's more likely we could do some of that electronically anyway. So depending on what comes out of it will probably influence how we take it forward.
And the other bit is, I think I understood that we were moving from locality planning to theme-based planning. And I'm just wondering how that's going to work. Because I'm particularly interested, I was reading the minutes of the Sutherland Partnership on rural transport. And though they seem to be trying to do as much as they can, they seem to have reached a sort of block. And this is obviously a Highland, and particularly North Highland issue. And I'm just wondering, I mentioned it to Gail a couple of weeks ago or so, I can't remember. But maybe could we be discussing, particularly at the moment, because I spoke to a local postie last week. He comes from Thursday, he comes all the way over here sometimes, is that he's just sold his car because he can't afford to run it. And I think it's more and more people are going to be in a position where they're going to have to use rural transport, and often rural transport is non-existent.
Yeah. No, really good point, and it came up in that joint session between the Sutherland Partnership and the Caithness Partnership last week. It's also going to be a factor for the Highland Board. There is an infrastructure group of the Highland Board where this is already on the agenda. So on Friday, we will hear an update from them as to where they are with the whole, not just community transport, but transport in general, the greening of transport or otherwise. So we'll feed back whatever we get from that. But I think there was a general agreement between the Caithness and Sutherland partnerships that, as you say, it's a much bigger issue for us than it would be for some of the Inner Murray Firth areas, for example. And there are good examples of community transport schemes. And Alan, who's just rejoined the call, Caithness Voluntary Group run a particularly good one. There are examples in Sutherland as well. They all take resources and finances to keep going, and I think that's one of the issues we come across the whole time, is the constant effort to keep all of these schemes funded and staffed appropriately. I don't know if Alan, sorry, you're just back in, but I don't know if there's anything you want to say on that subject.
Sorry, and I probably missed half the discussion, but I certainly can agree with you that we've got, I think, 8 vehicles, 3 paid drivers, and a lot of volunteers. And without those volunteers, we couldn't have run the service. But to run a transport service is incredibly expensive and getting more expensive by the day. So yeah, it's a constant struggle. Yeah,
and I don't think anybody's pretending that it's going to get easier either, because the writing on the wall for public finances over the next 3 or 4 years is not good. So whatever we do in the north, we're going to have to use the resources that are available to us, and we do have some resources that are not available to other areas as well. That's one point worth bearing in mind. Yep. So thanks for that, Michael. Anybody else got comments? No. Okay. In that case, Alan, would you be okay pretending that you're Brian Dodds for just 10 minutes?
Yes, I'll try my best. Yeah, sorry to arrive late.
No, you're quite all right.
Appointment, but yeah. So just to give you a wee update on what's been happening with the Poultry Action Group. Brian started in the role mid-September and has been working hard to assist as many groups as possible with quite a wide range of activities around the cost of living crisis. I won't detail everything in every organisation, but perhaps I'll concentrate on just some of the activities that we're seeing now in the county. Around warm hubs, a lot of these are kicking off with food provided. A wide range of organisations. There's churches, both in Wick and Thurso, PPP, Thurso Community Development Trust, are running lunch clubs. There's activities in Halkirk. There's going to be warm hubs with food in Snacks Go, Keith and Reese starting in January. Leipster and Dunbeef daycare centres are both looking to extend their hours to keep people in a warm environment with food for longer. I think it's the plan. So there's quite a lot happening around that front. Shearing sheds, we had an existing network, and that's looking to get extended now with progress being made in both Castletown and Tronagroats. We did a piece of work to extend the network of people able to refer to the food bank. It's a simple process. So again, if you're on this call and you think that might be appropriate to yourselves or your organisation, then please get in touch. I think what we're seeing is organisations have altered their normal practices and their priorities and are looking to support people during the crisis. Homestart, I'm seeing Fiona's on the call. Homestart is a great example. They've been fundraising for their winter warmer campaign to hand out warm clothing, hot water bottles, etc. We're seeing youth clubs adding food provision to their normal activities. So it's a lot of different organisations are dipping in and helping. It was also great to hear that Caithness was top of the league for applications to the Highland Council cost of living crisis. And quite a lot of groups are getting funding from that source. And maybe you've had an update, but if not, it would maybe be good to get an update on how that's going. There's clothes recycling pop-ups starting to appear, particularly a few in Thurso, I'm noticing on social media. Brian has been working with Katie Matthews at High Life Highland around sharing surplus PE sports clothing. He's working with East End, both the high schools and the rugby club to get that kind of initiative up and running. So I said, Brian, he had a background in renewable energy projects, and so he's been in touch with Michael at Home Energy Scotland, the guys at the Wick District Heating Scheme, the Highland Council, the Scottish Government, to see what the options are for both supporting buildings with a more efficient energy system and also extending district heating in the county. Like obviously it's early days and there's loads of potential, lots of work I think to do around this. You know, for instance, we've got 27 active village halls in the county. I suspect quite a lot of them could do with more modern, cost-efficient energy systems. So lots to do there. That's actually where Brian, he's on a warm home training course at the moment. That's why he couldn't be on the call. So the Citizens of Voice and Scottish Social Security have been doing pop-up support sessions. So that's starting to happen around the county. Again, if this is something that your organisation or area would think would be beneficial, then get in touch with either ourselves or with Sadie at CAB, and I'm sure something can be arranged. So it's good to see kind of real progress with areas that were identified by the Poverty Action Group way back in the summer. Things are starting to happen. Whether it's enough, that's a different argument, but at least things are happening. Some areas are slower. We'd spoken about healthy snacks for kids arriving at school, you know, hungry, not having a breakfast. That's something that I think has got to be led by the Highland Council. Too much for the community to take on. So any ideas would be welcome around that. Poverty Action Group also felt that there was potential for wind farm developers to share some of their current excess profits to fund poverty actions. So that's kind of ongoing as well. So to sum up, I think the community sector, supported by our statutory partners, are trying their best to provide support. If there's anything the Poverty Action Group should be doing, then please let us know. We'll, you know, as a collective, we'll try and best to do that. I think priority for the next period for Brian and for everybody, I think, will be to continue supporting organisations, also try to promote and highlight what's actually out there at the moment. You know, there's no point activities taking place if people don't know about them. So I think that's maybe where we'll be aiming to do some work over the next few months probably. So that's just a brief outline. Ian, if there's anything anybody wants to ask, I'll take a note of it and pass it to Brian. So.
That's really good, Alan. Thanks very much. And there's an awful lot of work within that as well. So it's good to see how much is happening. Anybody want to chip in with a question? Michael?
Yeah, I was just going to say I spoke to Jamie Stone's office this week in regard to oil, 28-second fuel, domestic heating oil. The situation at the moment is that there's a scheme in England, I think it's a scheme in Northern Ireland. One's £100, one's £200. And this has been held up because the Westminster government can't agree on how this should be distributed. They're not happy about giving individuals the money. Why, I don't know. But it's been left for discussions with the companies that deliver oil, and there's a lot of them, and the companies that deliver coal and other fuel and that sort of thing. So at the moment, bureaucracy is holding up this payment, and there needs to be a bit of pressure put on either the government or the agencies that deal with this to ensure these people get, you know, what people's gas are getting, that they get compensation with their fuel bills, particularly as the next week seems going to be very cold.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Michael. Just as a kind of, it's not an aside because it's absolutely on topic, but I wonder if any of the partners, either NHS, Police Scotland or Scottish Fire and Rescue, might want to say anything about what they are seeing on the ground in terms of the impact of the cost of living situation that we're now in. Is it impacting on service delivery? Is it affecting the numbers of people you're seeing, the types of incidents you're being called to? Anything you would want to contribute just now? Stephen.
Yeah, thank you. So we're not noticing a particular increase in any particular kind of area, although sort of normally we would expect to see a rise in fatalities and sudden deaths in homes around this time of year, particularly with elderly. But last night, I just want to highlight an incident last night. So there was an elderly female. Concerns were raised about her because her family or her friend in England hadn't heard from her, which is unusual. So the officers attended, and she's knocked the door. She'll answer the door. She's obviously quite confused, sort of showing signs of sort of early onset dementia. But she started to become more lucid the more they started to speak to her. But it became quite clear that she's living in quite a desperate situation. She can't afford to run a heating, so she normally relies on a heating, like an electric heater that she plugs in, but that's broken down. So she's been living in the house for I don't know how long now with no heating, and there was no food in the house last night. So last night the officers went to a neighbour, got a heater on loan for her, and they went to the food bank in Thurso, got her some food to see her through the night, and we arranged for social work to have a visit today. But that's just a sort of an indication of the desperation that this person is living in, and I dare say she's not alone.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good illustration, because quite often these are people who are so far below the radar that the intervention comes too late. So that's, and again, it's often the uniformed services that end up being the first responders in that situation. Paddy, you had your hand up, and I'm not letting you off just because you took it down.
Thanks, Ian. It was just we haven't seen, just to sort of build on what Stephen mentioned there, we haven't seen any specific incidents yet, but of course, given the circumstances, we are a big concern for us is around any people who can't afford to maybe heat their homes, or maybe reinstating chimneys, and they're not maybe swept properly. Unsafe use of maybe electrical items, that maybe heating appliances that they maybe can't afford to replace when they maybe are reaching the end of their lifespan. Use of candles in unsafe conditions, using unsafe fuels, maybe if they have reinstated their fire for heating, and it's all these sorts of safety messages that we're trying to get out there, and we're always encouraging any partners who would be working with any clients who they're maybe concerned that are engaging in any of these practices to please refer them to us, or come to us for advice. We'll be able to give people any home safety advice, fit the smoke alarms, and if we do come across anyone that we find may need some support, then we can refer them on to maybe the local food bank or social work. So it's like I said, we haven't seen anything yet specifically, but where it is on our radar.
But yeah, exactly, and the structures are there for you to be able to do things like refer, which is fantastic. I think the next person was Siobhan, and then Alan.
Hi everybody. I suppose coming from a public health perspective, what we've heard in sort of recent days over particularly the month of November is that there has been an increase in mental distress and suicide ideation. Now that is just not in Caithness, that is the whole of Highland and possibly specific areas in particular. We're looking into some of that data to try and find out a little bit more, and we'll be doing so over the next few months to really try and see, because at the minute, we can presume that some of that is down to the cost of living crisis, but actually we need to look at sort of the real reasons, I suppose, why, and maybe looking at sort of, I'm looking at Julie here and listening here, and maybe some other organisations to maybe do some work around that, to see that we could get some data around sort of supporting some of those presumptions, I guess. But yeah, we have seen an increase in distress, and it has been looked at Highland Community Planning Partnership level. I think there's going to be hopefully some increased communications and signposting, positive messages coming up to Christmas, but we are definitely expecting that things may continue to be sort of challenging. I can't speak for the acute mental health services, but that's just what we're seeing at a Highland Community Planning Partnership level with the police and other statutory services.
That's great. Thanks, Siobhan. Alan.
Yeah, just a to follow on from what Stephen kind of reported, obviously that's a concern, maybe not a surprise, but certainly a concern. And I think that emphasises the point that we do need to get, there's no point setting activities up and setting food sharing and warm hubs and all that up if nobody knows about it. And that's not as easy as it used to be to get word out.
Yeah.
I'll speak to my colleague Julie, who's better at this than me, to see what we can do to promote. But I think everybody's, if they can promote as much as they can what is available, I think it may be also an action for us to get in touch with social work so that we're working quite closely with them so that they know, because they're busy people as well, and they don't always know maybe what's available out there. So I think it's just trying to get as joined up as we can for the next few months. Thanks.
Excellent. Yeah, good point. Who have we got? I think it is Christian, and then Ron.
I was going to say there's not been a huge amount of change with what's coming through, but it would be probably through social work and community nursing that we would start to see the numbers coming up. We are kind of doing things for different reasons. We're looking at how we look at kind of home first and assessing people for going home, and part of that is much more about looking at the home environment, where some of that we might pick up. It's new, the way it's a Highland wide link to Scottish Government, but we would pick up some of that kind of stuff. But I was going to say that what Alan's already said is social work's probably the good direction to go, because obviously social work with the police and other partner agencies all the time and identifying vulnerable people. So I think, Alan, you'll know who to go to in social work, but if you need any kind of me to facilitate anything, happy to do that.
That's good, Christian. Thanks. And actually, yeah, back to Stephen's original point about that relationship between Police Scotland and social work, which is obviously an important one, but the relationship between social work and a number of other agencies on this call is equally important. So is there something in there that we should be at least looking at to make sure it's all that those links are all visible to the right partners? I'm not sure, but that's worth thinking on. Ron.
Yeah, thanks. The point of it for the the people who are struggling, we're trying to encourage neighbours to keep an eye out and everything. One thing what I've been doing, I've been speaking to the posties, because they're going round all the time, and they're sort of guys and lassies that sees what's going on, and they're quite good. They'll give feedback, which I think will help. And that it's a very important point there that Paddy made. I never really thought about it, but with people using candles and all that things, there's really a safety problem there. I don't know, Paddy, but do you have any leaflets in the service point? I can certainly, if you can get some, I'll get them in the service points, because people are coming in, and that's one place that people will see a leaflet, because there's not that many places in the town that posters are up as such. Development Trust did have a electronic sign, but it was supposed to be for that, but unfortunately I think there's problems with it. So it's getting a message out. I think it's really important to get a message out and just try and keep an eye on things. Yeah, so that sort of thing would help, Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Paddy, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, we do. Thanks for that. Ron, we do have leaflets, safety leaflets for whether it's home safety, winter safety. In fact, I think there was an email just went out this morning with a winter safety leaflet. So we do have literature that we can get out there. So I'll maybe get in touch with you after this meeting, if that's okay, just to discuss that.
Excellent. And if there's anything that's shareable amongst us, either electronically or otherwise, then happy to arrange distribution. Great, thanks, Paddy. Julie, and then Alexander.
Yeah, I'd just like to pick up on the point made that the cost of living crisis will mean that people need all kinds of things, food, warm places, and we are seeing an increase with that. So I'm wearing my listening ear hat as I report this, but I was delighted that we got given a grant from the Winter Warmer project. Slightly frustrated by the caveat that we're not allowed to use it to pay for staff, and we're not allowed to use it to pay for the building that we rent. So we, as part of our project, we do peer-to-peer support, and we rent various premises to do that. And one of those premises very kindly gives us a discounted rate, but we're not allowed to use this increase for paying for the excess heat that they will need to have. So just thinking about going forward, when we make these grants, please make them fit for purpose, because at the moment I'm not really sure how we're meant to use this money. So it's really good, it's great that it's there, it's come through fairly quickly, but I'm really not sure what we can do with it. So that's kind of with that hat on.
That's a really good point. And it's not the first time, and it probably won't be the last time, that we're left in situations like that, which is really frustrating for everybody, particularly for you. Yeah, and Joan's agreeing with you. Okay, thanks for that, Julie. And if there's anything that we can feed back along those lines, as a community planning partnership, we should definitely do that, because the whole point of these things is that you are supposed to learn from implementation. Okay, Alexander, and then Andrea.
Yeah, thanks. It was following on from what Ron said about giving to the service point. Obvious one, give it to the warm hubs as well, because any leaflets. Yeah, I think there's three operating in Thurso, and also the community cafe. We take them as well. And yeah, so I was recognising what Julie was saying about restrictions on grants. With my fundraising hat on, if you again speak to the administrators of the wind farm funds, they will find ways to for applicants to be able to spend money in whichever way they wish, and it doesn't have to be community council area specific, just as long as it primarily benefits the residents of that area. But the administrators will let you spend money.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say there's quite a bit of learning going on in the community about how to interact with those wind farm benefit committees. And Alan, you're probably as practiced as anybody in navigating your way around them.
I think, Julia, that was a Highland Council cost of living crisis funding you're speaking about, yeah. And I know it's Joan's comment, because I think Joan had the same issue back. So it's something, yep. I think maybe Andrea, she's got her hand up, so I'll leave Andrea to reply. Maybe it's something at least she can push back to the chiefs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Andrea.
Yeah, pretty much exactly what Alan said there. It's not just Julie and Joan that have brought up that issue. It's been a few people. Myself and Mac have passed that on to the powers that be, but if the community planning partnership could also add weight to that, it would be good. Do you want a very brief update on what has come into the county from that fund, if that would be helpful?
That would be really useful, yeah.
Yeah, just to put it into context, there's £450,000 available for 22 wards across the Highlands. Thurso, which is Ward 2 alone, applied for 90,000 of that. And Wick, which is Ward 3, applied for 70,000 of that. So that's from Caithness alone for just those two wards. I'm not sure how many applications we got in total, but 8 so far have been awarded, and that's a total of 48,000 that's come in. So money has come in, and it's been great to see such a good amount of applications from Caithness. But I totally agree with what's being said. The fact that the staffing costs are not being included in that has caused issues for some of the groups. So yeah, the money's come in, but it's just not quite been administered in perhaps the way that it could have been. So any feedback that you can give to the council regarding that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Andrea. And yeah, I mean, you always sympathise with people trying to get the money to the people who need it most, but there is always a cost attached to that, and when that's not included in your available money, it does make it more difficult.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. Thank you very much for all of those comments, and I'll certainly feed that back on Friday as well if I get a chance at the Highland conversation too. Julie, would you maybe take us into Caithness Cares?
Yep, sure. Different hat now. So the Caithness Cares plan is going really well. Actually, I'm pleased to report we have, for those of you that don't know, it's a 19-point action plan, and we have top 5 priorities that we tend to focus on. So these include centred the development of a Discovery College. It was called Recovery College, now Discovery College, and they're at the point now where they're ready to recruit a manager. So that's excellent. And this is about delivering courses and peer support within the community and really helping to support people on their journey at very local level. The second point is the recovery community and making sure that they have a voice in planning and in the processes that come when people are identified as having a need. And it's really good to see that CDAF are back in action. They've got a new plan. I won't talk too much about that because I'm sure at some point Matthew will be able to update people, but I think that's a really positive achievement, and that will be ongoing, obviously. Third is the employability group. So part of the actions was about making sure that young people have opportunities, not only for work, but work experience and things. I'll stop there because Andrea's going to be doing more of an update later on the employability group, but that's certainly one of the key areas. Then Planet Youth. So based on the Icelandic model, they've just recently developed their priority list, and they're requesting now that groups get involved. It's a community approach, and therefore we need communities to be involved in responding to the different needs that are on that plan. So if you can get involved, that would be great. I can put you in contact with whoever if you'd like me to. And then the final one, which is a slow burner, I have to say that it's one that comes out in any survey that we do, and that is access to services, and that's particularly mental health and wellbeing, including 24/7 support. But I do have some news on that. So I've been working with Caithness Mental Health Support Group to look at the difficulties that they're experiencing, and obviously there's an issue with capacity, and there's also a great opportunity for other services to work with them and to create some really good partnerships. So we have put in an application with the help of Habitus, who are also instrumental in the Recovery College or Discovery College, and put together a plan for a test of change. And that is looking at the way that the facilities that they have and the staff and the skills, the experience, and that real local place-based facilities, and looking at how we can support those organisations that want to really have a greater presence in Caithness, have stronger partnership working, which is brilliant. So they're in contact now with Centred, Joshi Project, Scottish Recovery Network, Listening Ear. We're doing some of our sessions in those buildings, and yeah, others. So it will be really helpful to have more of a coordinated approach, and part of the application is also about increasing capacity. So thinking about succession planning and those kind of things. So that's really positive. And again, I would encourage anyone that wants to be involved in that. It's a great opportunity. They have, I mean, Stepping Stones is an incredible building in and of itself. And I know there are plans ahead for part of the service certainly to be incorporated into the hubs, but this is an opportunity for us to get together and see how we can be more focused and targeted in what they offer. The next thing is just to say thank you for everybody that got back to me when I sent out a letter saying I'm purging the list because we have over 100 people on the list for it's meant to be about, I think, 10-15 people that would progress the action plan, but it's grown and grown, and we've had over 100 people involved in that. So I sent out an email and we had 86 respondents say they want to stay on the list, which I think demonstrates that people are really engaged with the Caithness Cares project. Some particular comments, I would actually just like to read a couple if I can, because these echo the thoughts of lots of other people that gave feedback when I also asked for support to continue progressing the action plan and facilitating the work that goes on behind the scenes, much of it. So Scottish Recovery Network, you'll be aware probably of them, and they said the learning from Caithness Cares unique approach will be incorporated into the upcoming launch of our national practical guides to meaningful engagement in Scotland. Caithness Cares recognised as pivotal in collaborative regional work as a key partner in the meaningful engagement of people with lived experience in the mental health strand of NHS Highlands' new mental health and learning disability strategy. So I think that's a really lovely outcome from the group, and that shows again the engagement. If I put out requests for anything, we do get that engagement, which is instrumental. And then Centred, Highlands' leading mental health charity, have been working in collaboration with Caithness Cares for some time now as we develop and implement a Discovery College to benefit people across Highland. Working with Caithness Cares has helped to ensure that the voice of local communities are heard and have been a key partner in circulating information and in supporting a lot of our co-development work. Again, another different outcome maybe that we'd initially thought. So just to finish off, our plans for the new year, we've got the next meeting in January. We went to quarterly meetings from August because the plan is underway and we have lots of interactions in between meetings. So it's really positive. So yeah, I think that's all from me, but I would be happy to take any questions or comments to feedback. Thank you.
That's brilliant, Julie. Thanks very much. And your two illustrations there prove the value of A, what you started off, but B, that kind of, if you look back a couple of years to where we were and we were thinking about that vacuum that sometimes exists between what's happening on the ground and what's happening further up the tree, that feels like that's the space that you're getting traction in, which is fantastic.
Can I also just add something? So Alan referred to it, that Caithness Cares and Here for Caithness is very, very closely intertwined. And Here for Caithness is typically used for promoting what is going on in the community, and that's through the Friday Bulletin. If you're not signed up to that, you can get onto that list. And I get reports back every week saying I can't believe how much is going into those bulletins. And maybe it's information overload sometimes, but at least it gives us a flavour of the training, adverts and such like. So what I would really like is for greater engagement with the social media, and that's not just so that we have numbers. We are there to serve you and what you're doing. So we want to make sure that we promote what you're doing. So a good way, if you're responding to the cost of living crisis particularly, please, I know some people are not really familiar with using hashtags, but if you can add, if you're offering a warm space, for example, or food, if you add hashtag Caithness here to that, then it makes it easier for people in the community to say, I need this, I need to search the hashtag, and I can find out. I don't have to, if I'm in Castletown, maybe I can get to Thursday, maybe I have something in Castletown, for example. So I would say use that, but also please make the community known about this, that they can search for things as well using the hashtag. And again, as I say, we're there for you to promote your services, and that's on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And that's all. Thank you.
Brilliant. Yes, good advice for those of you who know your way around hashtags. Excellent. That's fantastic, and probably leads us quite nicely into Andrea from an employability point of view.
Yep, thanks, Ian. Yeah, so the Caithness Cares Employability Group is set up and it runs alongside the North Highlands Local Employability Partnership, which is the statutory body that's got the access to the funding and resources. What the Caithness Cares Group does is it's bringing together the agencies sort of within the county that either offer employability services or have an interest in the services that are offered. So it could be that they offer mentoring, placement, support, and the emphasis is on younger folk, but also anyone with barriers to employment as well. So we've got folk from like Enable Works there and other agencies as well. And one of the main aims has been sort of a bit more joined up work, getting sort of mapping what's available for different people at different stages. And like as an example, within the schools, I've been speaking to Tracy Anderson, who's part of the My Future, My Success team, and we're going to try and map out what stage each agency gets involved within the schools so that teachers know who to refer to. But even she said when she works within the schools, and she said there's even agencies that she doesn't know that suddenly pop up and appear. So there's so much, I mean, it's not that there's nothing going on. The problem in some ways is there's so much going on that we don't all know what it is, and we don't, you know, people aren't getting referred. So there's a lot of that happening. Also looking at any other barriers to employment. So it could be examples being lack of certain skills. There's, particularly within young folk, there's certain skills that they maybe don't have or aren't getting. Also barriers for other groups such as folk with disabilities, people with mental health issues, those kind of things. And we also assist the North Highland Lake group if they need it. If they were wanting us to do some work around something like transport or childcare or some other barrier, we would see what we could do to help with that. So at the moment, we are looking for speakers to come along to some of our groups. We're hoping to get, we should have had somebody from you for your training, which is the Farmer Jones Academy in Tain. Should have been there today at our earlier meeting, but couldn't come along. So she'll be coming in the new year. She's quite keen to work or to sort of work with groups in Caithness to see what she can offer us up here. We're also hoping to have presentations from Developing Young Workforce, Skills Development Scotland. Also, we're looking for contact from any employers who are either looking for staff with a specific skill or who are willing to offer placements. Also job seekers who want to offer a perspective on any issues that they've come across. That would be really useful as well. And we're going to be taking part in a meeting in January that's being organised by My Future, My Success, which is looking at young people and the poor attendance. Apparently both the high schools are quite, the attendance is not great, but employability is going to be on the agenda for that. So that'll be really good to get involved in to see if we can just by that point, if we've got our mapping together, we can show them what's available, and hopefully that will maybe help. What has been noted is a lot of those kids, they're not engaging in school, but they probably will engage if they're given a placement. That's something that they they enjoy doing. So if anybody wants to contribute to that group at any point or join it or find out more about what we do, obviously get in touch and I can have a chat with you. And if anybody's got any questions, fire away.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andrea. And it's such a busy space, that whole skills and employability space, but it's so important. And we've, you know, it's the bedrock for everything else that we do.
Yeah, definitely.
And particularly when, as you say, we've got issues at both high schools in terms of basic attendance. Is this a way potentially around some of those, or encouraging different ways of bringing people in?
Yeah.
So yeah, anybody got any questions for Andrea just now? No, you've stunned them all into silence, Andrea.
Good, that's the best way to do it.
Brilliant. Okay, that's great. Thanks. And I suppose on a slightly related subject again, Helen, would you like to give a quick update on the children's plan?
Yeah, thanks, Ian. For those that don't know me, I'm Helen Ellis and I'm the Education Support Officer for Caithness in Sutherland. So I work quite closely with the Area Education Manager. And probably lots of what I'm going to talk about might intersect a bit with what's been discussed before, particularly Andrea was talking about the My Future, My Success program, which I was going to touch on this morning as well. I've been looking at the Caithness District Child Planning. We've got another meeting coming up on Friday, so we'll have some updates after that. But there were sort of improvement priorities which had been identified and things that we wanted to focus on. One of those in particular is in regards to childcare in the area for folk. We know that's a pressure in terms of for families. So I've been in discussions with CALA, who are the childcare provider, to see, they've come back to me with a few proposals of what they suggest might work locally. So we're hoping to discuss that. The other a couple of the other priorities that we've been working on. I know that Julie was talking about the calendar that's on for the Here for Caithness website, and that's been really fantastic to be able to have that. She's also put together a very helpful planner of toddler and baby activities for the weeks, and I've managed to share that with our childcare managers, so that's gone out to all our partner centres and to our early learning centres as well, so that can be shared with parents. But I think, as Julia said, it's getting the information out there, so that's really important to make sure everyone's got access to that. So we've been looking at that. Training is up on the website as well, but one thing we talked about was there's various sort of other providers that can provide training for families if they're interested, and I've been in discussion with, some of you may have heard, the Pines that are based in Inverness and provide neurodevelopmental training, but they also provide lots of really helpful information sessions for parents. So they've suggested that they're happy for that information to be shared locally as well, and just to get that out there, because we quite often get the information through on school websites, but we don't necessarily, or through school emails, but we don't necessarily perhaps get the opportunity to pass that on. So that's something we'll look at trying to put out there, because some of those sessions, they're all free, they're all online, and they can be really, really helpful for some people. So we'll talk about that as well. The My Future, My Success one, I'm glad Andrea mentioned it, because it's Maxine Garson, who's our Quality Improvement Officer, has been working with this. And I've been in discussion with Maxine for quite some time, myself and Alison, about the program. So we identified, and obviously it has been identified, need that we do have young people in both the Thurso and Wick High Schools who are disengaged from education or are poor attenders. So this scheme really is looking at getting to them to identify those young people that we can support and getting them to re-engage if possible. And what we've found is that, you know, there have been referrals come through from the schools. They're getting a good engagement level with the young people that are signing up for it. And so we're hoping that that will just increase as time goes on. So that's hopefully something that's going to just go forward further on. We are looking at having, I think Andrea mentioned, there'll be a development day that we're looking, I think it's, I'm not sure the date, but I think it's the end of January, early February. We're going to be meeting at the high school with secondary heads and primary heads as well, because attendance is an issue which is not just a secondary issue, it's an issue for primary school pupils too. And we're going to be looking at, there's Education Scotland's attendance toolkit that we're going to be using. So we're going to be working through some of the possible reasons for poor attendance, trying to address some of those, but coming up with a multi-partnership approach to it as well. So not just looking at it in terms of what schools are able to do in regards to attendance, but are there other ways that the community can support attendance? And I think some of the issues you touched upon this morning, when I've been listening to you all talking in the meeting, I think some of those things feed into it. So it's been really helpful to be here and listen. So yes, our next meeting for the child's planning is on Friday. So we should have some more updates after that. So thank you.
Brilliant. I think I've said this after everybody's spoken today, but that's really good and really important stuff. So there's a kind of theme emerging from today's call. We are all involved in really important pieces of work, and Helen, you said it, but several other people have said it. The linchpin for all of that is communication, and we keep saying it, and I think we are much better at that than we probably were. And I would use examples like Julie's weekly communications as, you know, it's there if you need it, and sometimes you don't even know you do need it, but it's there. So examples like that, I think just disseminating that is half the battle. That's great, thanks, Helen. And I think just these are all interlinked. And that's absolutely deliberate, isn't it, Gail? So all of this makes sense as you go through the meeting. And just to finish off that communication piece, Gail's been hosting that kind of monthly community conversation, which I think is an example of something that works. But I always think it's worth testing whether everybody else thinks that it works. and it feels like we're getting to a point where it's worth asking people whether they are still valuing opportunities like that. Gail, do you want to just very quickly outline what's been happening over the last few months with that communication channel?
Absolutely. So they are quarterly, Ian. So they're just kind of about a month after this main meeting. So it's entirely voluntary. There's no agenda. It's it's much more informal, but it's an opportunity for groups to come along and just share some information, share ideas, gather some details about what's going on around the county. It's only for an hour, so it's not a massive commitment for it. But yeah, I guess the question is, is it relevant? Do people find it relevant? Would they prefer or benefit from more of a structure to it, or what would people like the future of that quarterly, I nearly said monthly there again, quarterly meeting take place? I'm not committing myself to monthly, I'm sorry. That wasn't a slip. So interested to know. I know, Keith, you've been along a few times. Julie's been there. I think, Christian, you've been in as well. I've tried at the last one. I tried to get an input from Debbie Murray at UHI, because that was coming to the end of their kind of consultation period. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get her, but if there's other maybe speakers or anything that people would like to see come along, I'm happy to work around that, but also happy to just gather feedback in general.
Yeah, so that's the kind of open question for people, not necessarily for this morning, but just for the next few days. Is it still something you value? Is there something that would change its value up or down for you? Any views welcomed, and if anybody wants to give anything just now, then that's fine. No hands going up.
And the date for the next one is the 18th of January, 11 o'clock.
So I'll tell you what, can we set ourselves a deadline to get any comments or responses into Gail by the end of this week, please? And then we can go into the new year knowing what we're doing with it, and or indeed if we're doing anything with it. So that would be positive or less positive comments. Don't be afraid to make them.
Thank you.
Okay. Right, Matthew, I think you are next on the agenda.
Yes. Yeah, it's just a wee sort of brief update on the Your Police You Decide project that sort of started just at sort of tail end or a few months back. For those briefly, I'll not going into it in too much detail, but those who don't know about it, it's a participatory budgeting project that's been run between Caithness Voluntary Group and Police Scotland, where £32,000, which has been awarded by the Scottish Government, to be spent in the area of Caithness on the sort of broad focus of safety and well-being and poverty and inequality. And it sort of purposely made quite a broad topic, and so try not to sort of focus too much on one particular issue, to try and make it as wide as possible, so it gives as much chance for anyone to apply that they can. There was a total of 18 projects applied for the funding, which was brilliant to see a good sort of variety of different types from different areas. And that sort of has gone through the process, and voting's now opened. I'll not read through all this information, but voting opened on the 28th of November, and it'll be going through until the 18th of December. So given plenty of time to get those votes in. With the plan is now to get the money out before the end of the year. We're aware that some of the projects were focused around cost of living crisis and that, so we thought it's key to try and get that money out as soon as possible, rather than trying to sort of wait too long for that. The voting platform has been well created by the team down in strategy, insight, engagement, and it's all online focused. You can go onto its ideas.scotland.police.uk and you can vote for as many or as little projects as you like. There's sort of a wee little description about what the project is and what you're looking for funding wise. It was quite good to see that within a day of the voting being open, there was already several hundred votes on the system already. So I'm not sure where that is now, but it's increasing as time goes on. And equally as well, it's quite a good opportunity for a lot of these projects to sort of promote themselves a wee bit as well, not just for getting the funding, but also, as was mentioned, spreading word about what projects are out there and what people are looking to do. So that's been online, and we're also going to be doing a bit of in-person voting. So the first one was held just Sunday past at PPP at their Christmas market, with further ones hopefully to be held in Thursday later this month. But all that information will get shared throughout our social media channels, and sort of all the groups are encouraged to share. You know, they're sort of responsible for sharing their projects and getting the word out there a wee bit to hopefully gather as many votes, and go from there. But yeah, that's sort of a brief summary. So
great.
No, that's to sort of share that as much as possible, get as much people voting as we can, and if there are any sort of further questions, Kevin Ditcham, he's been the sort of the project lead for that. He's quite happy to answer any questions, and equally, if I can help at all, I'm quite happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Brilliant. Well, I'm seeing one coming through from Keith on the chat there about, is there a lower age limit for people voting?
No, so voting online, it's quite easy. There does need to have an email address, and only reason for that is just to sort of stop any bots or spam votes and just try and protect from that a wee bit. So as long as they have access to an email address, they can vote online. Equally, if the reason the in-person votes were sort of decided upon was just we're aware that some people are not sort of don't have access to email, don't have access to internet, so it gives them the opportunity to vote in person, and hopefully we can spread that word out, not just online. So I know that the local papers has been quite good at promoting that a wee bit, and Caithness FM as well. And Inspector, he'll be going on there to sort of talk about it. Is it this week? Is it that you're on?
Yeah, tomorrow.
Tomorrow. So trying to get out there as much as we can from different ways, so we're not just limiting it to online.
Excellent. Great stuff. Ron, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was just so delighted to hear that they have a face-to-face way of voting, because it's really so important. A lot of things are concentrated online, but as we said, Matthew, not everybody has online access, and it's really good to get a face-to-face thing. Yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, it is really good, and it will be really good just to hear how it goes, both from the people who get the money, but also from you as an example of participatory budgeting as well. So really good.
I think there had been sort of intention to hold an in-person event where the projects could sort of pitch that ideas, but as I said, we're aware that time was sort of pressing on. It was trying to do that. I think the hope is that we can still hold some sort of celebration event at the end of the project once the successful projects have had their money given out to them, to sort of talk a wee bit about what they're doing and how the money's been spent. And hopefully that will still go ahead. I was just seeing that message from Fiona there. But Kevin, that sort of leads the project, he's been quite keen to hear as much feedback as we can. And for the event on Sunday at PPP, there was some sort of feedback around how the paper votes were done. So I'll feed that back to them. Great
stuff. And Alexander, I think there was 18. Is that what you said,
18
Matthew?
applications. It's quite a good variety of different projects.
Excellent. That's really good, Matthew. Thank you very much.
So just to answer Fiona's query there about the voting online, you have to register. Now that's probably the only issue. That is, we need some sort of way of safeguarding the vote, I suppose, to stop people from doing multiple votes for the same thing by the same person. It makes it very much impartial then, by having everyone registered. They can make one vote. Like, once they've registered, they can make as many votes as they want for there's 18 applications there. They can vote on each one and give it a different star grading, but they can only put one vote per project once.
Yeah, I mean, I completely understand why it's in place. It's just the simplicity of, I think some people, they just want to click and be done. But I get that they could make multiple voting.
Yeah.
So as I get it, it's trying to weigh it up to make sure it's fair and equal.
Okay, that's great. And I think, unless anybody's got any further questions, that takes us to any other business. And I know we've got 2 noted down as any other business, one of which is a written update from Kirsty that, well, she's down on this group as Let's Get On With It Together, but the update is the North Highland Women's Health Hub, sorry, Wellbeing Hub. And I think, Gail, that was circulated with the papers, if I'm right.
No, not yet, because I only just got it. So what
Okay.
I'll do is I've got a list of about 15 things now to circulate post this meeting, so I will add that to the collection, Ian.
Indeed. Okay. So I've seen a copy of it, and it's short, but it's really, really good. They've done some amazing stuff in a very, very short space of time, and both on endometriosis, but on other related women's health issues. So it makes really good reading. The Women's Wellness Festival, which some of you may have participated in, worked really well, and looks like it'll continue as far as I can see. So it's a really good start. So yeah, Gail will circulate that update from Kirsten. And the other thing was UHI related, Gail.
Yeah, I circulated an email. I can't even remember when I sent it out. It might have been the end of November. From Sarah Bradley. So they are doing a session. I'm trying to read the email and speak at the same time. Regarding a prescribed heritage programme and working in partnership with High Life Highland and Museums Heritage Highland and various others. So there's a session taking place in Wick tomorrow. About it, and the time wasn't on the original email, so it was to confirm that the time is 9:30 AM to midday. For that email, if people want to kind of look it up or are thinking of attending, then that's the timing. I just wanted to confirm that, and then I've got another AOCB since then as well, Ian, if that's okay.
Go on then, knock yourself out.
Thanks. So I've circulated the fire service flyer during the meeting because people were obviously really interested in getting that quickly. So I've already done that to the big circulation list. And the other one, and I don't want to put you on the spot, Siobhan, but Siobhan circulated or sent me a report just earlier today, which I'm going to circulate out. But Siobhan, do you want to touch on it for a couple of minutes just to say what it is and give a bit of background? That'd be really helpful. And I'm sorry, I've just put you on the spot.
Thank you, Gail. It's my own fault. I only sent it to you this morning. So what I've sent around is just an updated partnership profile. So sort of looking at the demographics of Caithness and some of the SIMD data. It's been put together by our health intelligence team. So I think we've not had an updated one in a few years now. So if there's any questions or anything that you want to know, just let me know. I'll put my email on the chat. But Gail, you happy to send it around?
Yeah, like I say, I've got a couple of things to circulate, so I'll do that immediately after the meeting, Siobhan.
Yeah, there's a really nice summary at the start that's just sort of giving a bit of a rundown on sort of the main points. It probably won't be very surprising to hear that, our older age group population is continuing to increase. I'm looking through it just now because I've only seen it this morning myself. So over sort of the last few years, we're looking at a 42% increase in the over 65 plus age group and a 7% reduction in the population 16 to 64 years. Just another point that I picked out earlier as well. Again, just rural deprivation being a significant concern. And, we're looking at sort of 9.6% of working age population are employment deprived. So it's all in there and you can read at your leisure, but if there's any questions or anything, just get back to me and I can ask Health Intelligence.
That's great. That's great. And I'm sure there'll be quite a few people on this call that will be very interested in reading it. Me being one of them. Alexander, you've got your hand up.
Yeah. Yes, thanks. It was just a quick question about what Siobhan was saying about the reduction in population. Has the population modelling been updated? Because if you remember, you know that Wick High is rapidly approaching capacity because they underestimated the birth rate in Caithness. And I think part of the reason was that they were, well, I think all of the reason was that they were basing it on babies actually born in Caithness, not Caithness babies born in Inverness. So has the population modelling been updated since then?
That's possibly a question to come back with the answer to, I would say.
Yeah, probably. I'm just again quickly looking over this because I've not had time to read it this morning. There has been a decrease in birth rates, but that's been going on for the last decade. So that I don't think is sort of new news. So I don't know really is the answer to your question, Alexander.
Okay, cheers. Something to look into.
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
Great stuff. Thank you. Has anybody else got anything they would like to discuss under AOB? Nope. No hands going up. Right, in that case, the last thing just briefly to mention, which I kind of referred to much earlier in the meeting, was next year's meetings. So there are dates in the calendar, which is at least in part an attempt to get closer in sync with the council meetings. I don't think they've gone out yet, Gail, as calendar invites.
Not to the full group, Ian. They've gone to the leads as calendar invites.
Okay.
But due to GDPR, I can't do that to the full group. So yeah.
Yeah. So the note is on the agenda of the next all the meeting dates for 2023, and we'll email out agendas and papers closer to the time. So the first one for next year will be on, as Michael said earlier, Friday the 3rd of March, and we'll work on quarterly after that. Okay, in that case, that's us reached the end of the agenda, and if nobody else has anything, then I'm going to call it a day there, and you will get 15 minutes of your day back as a Christmas gift. And I will, if I don't speak to you before Christmas, I hope you have a good one, a safe one, a healthy one, and we'll see you in the new year. Thanks, folks.
Okay.
Thanks, Ian. Merry
Cheers.
Christmas.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Ian.